The American dream, a once vague representation of what this country was all about. For many, this dream started with home ownership. Nothing is more American than a house you can call truly yours. Today, that dream is quickly fading as home prices jump up and interest rates follow. How long before this massive super bubble explodes? In today's video, we explore some rather alarming new data freshly published by various sources that reveals a bizarre and troubling story. Across the nation, more and more people find themselves frustrated, angry, and bitter. Since 2020, real estate has spiraled out of control with year-over-year growth never before seen in history. According to Redfin data, the median sale price of a home went from $270,000 in January of 2020 to $396,000 as of the latest reading. This turbulent time revolutionized the market and ushered in a new era of the American dream, one that today is getting more and more exclusive as affordability takes a nosedive. But we have already heard this story. Yes, home prices are not budging yet, and yes, average monthly payments for a mortgage have reached well over $2,000, nearly doubling from pre-pandemic levels. That tale has already been told. You didn't click on this video to hear about how bad it is, you clicked on here to find out when the crash is coming. After all, everyone on YouTube is predicting the big one. Predictions like this are getting more and more common.
That's one camp. The other camp is, it's about to hit the fan. Real estate's going to drop. Inflation's going to keep going up. Interest rates are going to go up. The next 12, 18, 24 months are going to be ugly, but it's going to be fine. It's not the end of the world. We'll come out of this in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
So what's the truth? Is it really a good idea to delay a home purchase in hopes that the market crashes? Well, to answer the question, you first have to understand a bit of wild history and economics. You see, housing is like any other market on earth, kind of. There's a supply of homes and a demand pool of people. You've probably heard that we're pretty low on the supply, historically speaking, and you've also likely heard that up until recently, demand has been pent up. For example, on Redfin, the number of active listings in 2020 was 1 million, and in 2016, it was as much as 1.5 million. The supply side got so bad that at one point the number of active listings was down to 500,000. Today it's creeping back up to around 700,000. This in effect had a profound push on prices. Houses were rare, and that led to dozens of bids on each listing, pushing prices up in a way that we've never seen before in history. The demand side of the equation followed the same principle. If we look at the number of days it takes to sell a home, we can get a good gauge regarding how much demand there really is. In 2020, the number was as high as 60, and lately in 2022, it was as low as 16. These two things combined resulted in housing prices accelerating in a way that was previously thought to be impossible. Very high demand, very low supply, plus very low interest rates. But now things are changing and everyone has their finger pointed at a crash. While we think about these recent developments, it's natural to compare the current housing boom to the mid-2000s housing bubble. But before you get worked up on the stats, here's the thing. Today's housing market doesn't even come close to resembling the one we saw in 2005. Sure, prices back then were accelerating, but there are some serious differences everyone seems to be avoiding. The number one reason is lending standards. In 2005, getting a massive loan was easy. A heartbeat is all it took. That's not even an exaggeration. If you watched the movie The Big Short, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Plenty of places were handing out ninja loans. No income, no job, just leave the income section blank and get the approval. We can prove that by looking at the stats. If we peek at the bottom 1% of borrowers in 2005, they had an average credit score of 525. This is considered extremely poor, and the fact that anyone was allowing these types of customers to buy homes with subprime adjustable rate mortgages was a tragedy. Today, the game has changed. The bottom 1% of borrowers have an average above 600, and most lenders won't even consider you before you get to 640. The overall health of the homebuyer today is miles better than what we saw in the mid-2000s. It's just a lot harder to get a loan. Then on the demand side, the demographics are much better as well. Today, the largest generation in America's history, the millennials, are finally reaching prime home buying age as one of America's other generations, the baby boomers, die out. These two things combined make comparing this environment to the mid-2000s rather unjust. A better comparison would be the late 70s and early 80s. This case is highlighted by Bill Mcbride, one of the most knowledgeable professionals in real estate, someone who doesn't just spout predictions, but backs them up with real historical data. We're going to look through his recent post on his Substack, and as we go through it, the evidence will be crystal clear. The real estate market isn't what you think it is. But before we do that, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you're enjoying the content thus far. Okay, so now back to his post. In 1978, America was going through tough times similar in many ways to what we're going through today. Inflation was skyrocketing. Look at this chart of year-over-year inflation changes and you can see the massive spike in 1979. This followed an already turbulent era of increasing inflation in years past. On top of this, the country was going through an oil shock. We can visualize this with a graph of the percentage of personal income spent on energy goods. In 1980, we saw a large move up. Today, we're seeing the same thing, although energy consumption is a smaller percentage of the overall economy. Now, because of these things, the Fed at the time was fighting inflation with higher rates, which meant that the 30-year mortgage rates were also jumping up. In fact, back then, they got up to as high as 18%. A move that, when looked at percentage-wise, is similar to what we're seeing today. So why bring all of this up? Well, everything we saw back then is comparable to what we're seeing right now, and examining the housing market during this period may provide us a clue to what will happen with our current real estate market over the next few years. You see, starting in 1976, real home prices, that is housing prices adjusted for inflation, rose to a peak in 1979 and then declined about 11% over the next 3 years. When I say this, remember that in nominal terms, or the prices you would actually see quoted on Zillow, those prices actually rose during this period of real price decline, but the high inflation rate eroded the real value. Recall that the illusion of prices is morphed by high inflation, and that's something we tend to ignore in today's environment. Regardless, just understand that real prices declined following 1979 by about 11%, which pales in comparison to 2007, where we saw a real price decline of 36% following the explosion of the bubble. A lot of people conclude that this is where we're headed today, a slight decrease in real prices with an overall increase in nominal prices. To support this even further, we see that even during this time in the late 70s, new home sales were plummeting just as they are today. In fact, in 1979, new home sales went from 800,000 to 400,000, falling around 50%. Today, we're down about 20% from the recent peak, and if we glance at 2008, you can see just how extensive the damage was. Back then, new home sales fell from around 1.4 million to about 300,000, or an 80% decline. So next time you see a so-called expert quote this stat as evidence of a potential price crash, just understand that in 1979, prices continued to go up despite a 50% reduction in new sales. And in 2008, prices only fell around 22% nationally, while new sales plunged over 80%. So in summary, what I'm saying is this: we should expect something similar to that of the 1970s. A decline in real home prices seems likely, but nominally they shouldn't change much. In fact, they will likely go up. We can be reasonably confident that we won't see a complete crash as we saw in 2008. And for people who believe we will get pre-pandemic prices again, I wish you the best of luck. Those who believe that are going against 100 years of data and are hoping for the worst housing crash in the history of capitalism. As always, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and make sure you check out Bill McBride's Substack, which is linked in the description below.